A black man was stopped from boarding his flight, and when his identity was revealed, the entire airport was left in shock. Imagine a doctor, fully prepared to save a life, being prevented from boarding his plane. Unbelievable, right? Yet, this is precisely what happened, and the unfolded story will forever alter how you view the world. If you are not subscribed, I recommend you subscribe and activate the bell so you don't miss any videos. The alarm blared at 5 a.m., jolting me awake from a restless sleep. My heart was already pounding with anxiety before I even fully grasped the situation. This was the day of a critical emergency surgery in another state, and there was no room for error. I simply could not miss this flight. As I rushed to get ready, my mind was consumed with thoughts of the patient awaiting my intervention, a 62-year-old man suffering from scarcity, a challenge that only a few surgeons in the country were qualified to tackle. Every single minute was crucial. When I glanced in the mirror, I saw a 45-year-old black man with graying hair at the temples and eyes marked by sleepless nights. With no time to fuss over appearances, I quickly threw on a pair of jeans and a plain t-shirt. "Marcus, you're going to be late," I muttered, grabbing my pre-packed bag and hurrying out the door. To my surprise, traffic was unusually light for a Wednesday morning. As I navigated the streets toward the airport, my phone rang. It was Dr. Peterson, my colleague at the hospital where the surgery was scheduled. "Marcus, I'm relieved you answered. We're all on edge here, anxiously awaiting your arrival. Mr. Thompson is stable for now, but..." "I understand, James. I'm en route to the airport as we speak. I'll be there on time, so don't worry," I replied, striving to project a confidence I didn't entirely feel. Little did I know that this seemingly routine journey would soon take a turn that would challenge my expectations and reshape my perspective on life and the world around me. I pulled into the airport parking lot with a mere 40 minutes remaining before boarding time. With urgency propelling me forward, I leaped out of the car and began to race through the bustling terminal corridors. My suitcase trailed behind me, its wheels clattering noisily against the floor. In my haste, I jostled several passengers who were engrossed in their distractions. "Excuse me, sorry," I muttered repeatedly, weaving and dodging through the throng of travelers. Breathless and drenched in perspiration, I finally skidded to a halt at the check-in counter. The attendant, a middle-aged woman with blonde hair, surveyed me with a faintly disconcerted look. Her eyes swept over my disheveled appearance and the chaos I had just stirred up. "Good morning, how can I assist you?" she asked, her voice tinged with an undertone that didn't quite align with her outwardly courteous demeanor. "Good morning. Dr. Marcus Johnson here, for Flight 302 to Chicago, first-class ticket, please," I responded, trying to maintain a composed demeanor despite the mounting pressure. She began typing swiftly on her computer, her face growing increasingly perplexed as she scanned the screen. "Sir, are you certain this is a first-class ticket?" Taken aback, I answered, "Yes, this is a critical work trip. The hospital always books first class for urgent medical situations." The attendant exchanged a wary glance with her colleague, who had been observing from behind the counter. He was a man in his early 30s with neatly styled brown hair. "Karen, is there an issue here?" he inquired. "John, could you take a look at this? The gentleman here asserts he has a first-class ticket," but Karen's voice trailed off as she gestured towards the computer screen. John stepped forward, scrutinizing both the screen and me with a scrutinizing gaze. "Sir, I'm going to need to see your ID, please." Confused by the apparent skepticism, but eager to resolve the matter swiftly, I handed over my driver's license along with my hospital ID. John studied the documents with what felt like an interminable slowness, intensifying my anxiety. Sweat dripped down my back, not solely from the terminal's heat, but also from my mounting stress. "These IDs seem somewhat unusual," John remarked, casting a glance back at Karen. "Look," I said, striving to stay calm under the pressure, I'm a cardiac surgeon on an urgent trip to Chicago for a life-saving surgery. I need to get on this flight as soon as possible. If there's any way you can expedite this, I'd be deeply grateful." Karen and John exchanged skeptical looks, their expressions reflecting uncertainty. Clearing her throat, Karen said, "Sir, I'm going to need you to wait a moment. I'll need to consult with my supervisor." My stomach sank as I glanced at the clock on the wall, which now showed only 25 minutes until boarding. Each moment was slipping away rapidly. "Please." I implored, "There's no need for that. I can provide proof via email or phone to the hospital, whatever is necessary. I just need to catch this flight." At that moment, I became acutely aware of the growing impatience among the passengers waiting behind me. Several began murmuring to each other, their irritation palpable. Some even pulled out their phones, presumably to capture the unfolding scene. A man in a sharp suit, who was directly behind me, voiced his frustration loudly. "What's the holdup? Why is this taking so long?" John, clearly uncomfortable with the escalating situation, responded, "Sir, please be patient. We're dealing with an issue regarding identification." Heat rushed to my face as I realized the gravity of the situation. It was distressingly clear that the delay was not just about routine checks, but something more insidious. I refused to accept that in 2023, such a scenario was unfolding before me. Not when a critical life was at stake. "Listen." "Agee," I said, attempting to keep my voice steady and controlled. "I understand I might not fit the typical image of a first-class passenger or a doctor, but I assure you, I am who I say I am. Please check again, if necessary. Call the hospital to verify my credentials. I cannot afford to miss this flight." Karen's irritation was palpable as she responded, "Sir, I need you to calm down. The supervisor is on their way and will resolve this matter. However, if you continue to cause a disturbance, we'll have to involve security." I closed my eyes momentarily, grappling with a mix of anger and despair. How could I convey the urgency of my situation? How could I convince them to look past their assumptions and see the reality of the life-threatening situation I was facing? The supervisor, a middle-aged man with a badge identifying him as Robert, arrived quickly. He listened attentively as Karen and John recounted the situation. Then he turned his gaze to me. "Dr. Johnson, is it? If you could please come with me, we'll handle this in a more private setting." As I followed Robert, I could hear the whispers from the line behind me, some voices expressing sympathy, others annoyed by the delay. They were oblivious to the critical nature of the situation, unaware that each lost minute could jeopardize a life in Chicago. If you are still watching this video and find these stories useful, please comment number 1 below to let me know that you are still watching this video with me. Thank you for your valuable time. Robert led me to a small, nondescript room at the back of the check-in area. The space was stark and cramped, furnished only with a table and 2 chairs. The stark white walls seemed to close in on me, intensifying my sense of confinement and urgency. "Dr. Johnson, please have a seat," Robert instructed, gesturing to one of the chairs. His tone was polite, but the subtle wariness in his eyes spoke volumes. "Mr. Robert," I began, trying to keep my voice steady, "I need to make it to this flight. There is a patient in Chicago waiting for emergency surgery. This is a matter of life and death, and I'm asking for your assistance to expedite this process." Robert's scrutinizing gaze lingered on me, taking in my casual attire with a discernible air of skepticism. "I understand that you're in a hurry, sir, but we have established protocols that we need to follow. Could you please show me your documents again?" I let out a deep, weary sigh, my frustration palpable. I handed over my hospital ID and driver's license once more, feeling the weight of each moment into eternity. Robert examined the documents meticulously, holding them up to the light, as if hoping to catch a glimpse of something fraudulent or amiss. His thorough inspection felt like a personal affront, an unwelcome reminder that my credibility was being questioned at a time when I was already on edge. "These documents seem rather unusual," he remarked, echoing the earlier doubts voiced by John, the security officer. His tone was casual, but it carried an undertone of disbelief that only fueled my growing irritation. "They are completely legitimate," I snapped, my voice trembling with the strain of maintaining composure. "If you need further verification, I can call the hospital right now. They can confirm my identity without any doubt." Robert dismissed my offer with a wave of his hand, his demeanor cold and unyielding. "Dr. Johnson, if that's really who you are, you must understand that we need to exercise caution. It's highly unusual for someone with your appearance to claim a first-class ticket and assert that they are a renowned doctor." My blood boiled at his words. "My appearance? What exactly do you mean by that, Mr. Robert?" I demanded, my voice rising with indignation. Robert's discomfort was evident, but he pressed on. "Well, your casual attire and your visibly agitated demeanor, it's not typical for our first-class passengers. It raises questions that we can't ignore." "I'm dressed like this because I had to leave my home in a rush due to a medical emergency," I exclaimed, my frustration spilling over. "And as for my behavior, how do you expect me to remain calm when I'm being unfairly targeted and prevented from performing my duties because of prejudice?" Robert raised his hands in a defensive gesture, his expression a mix of unease and detachment. "Sir, there's no need to become agitated. We're just following standard procedures." At that moment, a loud commotion erupted outside the room, and the door burst open. Karen, the check-in attendant, rushed in, her face flushed with urgency. "Robert, the situation is spiraling out of control. Some passengers are filming the incident and threatening to post it on social media." Robert's face went pale, a look of panic and frustration crossing his features. He turned to me, his eyes reflecting a blend of concern and irritation. "Dr. Johnson, I'm going to have to ask you to come with me. We need to resolve this issue in the presence of our security team." My heart sank at the mention of security, a wave of despair washing over me. Security? This is utterly ridiculous. I am the one facing discrimination here. My voice broke with the weight of my frustration and helplessness as I struggled to reconcile the absurdity of the situation with the reality of my predicament. Ignoring my desperate protests, Robert dragged me out of the room, his grip firm and unyielding. As we stepped into the terminal, the bustling scene was a sharp contrast to the tense atmosphere that had just engulfed me. A small crowd had gathered, their curiosity piqued by the commotion. Many passengers had their phones out, recording the unfolding drama, while others were engaged in loud, heated exchanges with the airport staff. The cacophony of voices, the flash of cameras, and the palpable sense of unease created a chaotic backdrop that only intensified my mounting anxiety. Among the spectators was a middle-aged woman whose face was flushed with a deep, uncontained anger. Her voice rang out with a sharpness that cut through the din of the terminal. "This is outrageous," she exclaimed, her words filled with indignation. "You can't treat people like this just because of the color of their skin." Her outburst was not just a critique of the situation, but a fierce condemnation of the injustice she perceived. Her eyes, wide and blazing with fury, reflected a profound sense of moral outrage, resonating with the growing sentiment of the crowd. Robert, trying to maintain some semblance of authority, attempted to placate the situation. "Mom, please step back. This is an internal matter," he said, though his voice wavered, betraying his uncertainty and the mounting pressure he felt. His attempt to assert control was undermined by the growing intensity of the situation and the visible unease among the crowd. As I glanced at the clock on the wall, the reality of the situation hit me with full force. Only 10 minutes remained until my flight was scheduled to depart, and the gravity of the impending delay weighed heavily on my shoulders. Desperation clawed at me, twisting my insides into knots. With a trembling voice, I turned to the crowd, my plea spilling out with a raw intensity. "Please," I begged, addressing not just Robert but everyone around me. "I'm Dr. Marcus Johnson. I have an emergency surgery scheduled in Chicago. My life depends on me. I can't afford to miss this flight." The words felt like they were tearing from my very soul, a desperate cry for understanding and compassion amid an overwhelming crisis. My heartfelt plea seemed to resonate with some of the onlookers. The murmurs of sympathy that began to spread through the crowd were like a balm to my frayed nerves. The shared empathy and growing concern among the passengers offered a flicker of hope in an otherwise bleak situation. Just then, 2 security guards approached, their presence commanding immediate attention. The taller of the two, his deep, resonant voice cutting through the tense silence, asked, "What's the issue here?" The question hung in the air, a beacon of authority amidst the chaos, seeking to unravel the tangled web of misunderstanding and injustice. Before Robert could fully explain the situation, a woman's voice, sharp and clear, cut through the growing silence. "Wait a minute, I know this man." Her voice, though coming from behind the crowd, carried a sense of urgency that immediately shifted the focus. The crowd parted, revealing a young woman in her early 30s, impeccably dressed in a business suit. Her heels clicked authoritatively on the tiled floor as she made her way toward us, her expression a mix of determination and relief. "Dr. Johnson, it's me, Sarah from Mount Sinai Hospital," she said, her voice filled with recognition and concern. "What are you doing here?" The sight of Sarah, someone familiar and trusted, was like a lifeline thrown into the turbulent sea of my predicament. Relief flooded through me as I saw her. "Sarah, thank God you're here," I exclaimed, my voice breaking with emotion. "I'm trying to get to Chicago for an emergency surgery, but they're not letting me board the flight." The words came out in a rush, a mixture of relief and frustration at the absurdity of the situation. Sarah's face hardened with a fierce resolve as she turned her gaze to Robert and the security guards. Her eyes blazed with an intense, unyielding anger. "Do you have any idea who this man is?" she demanded, her voice rising with indignation. "Dr. Marcus Johnson is one of the top cardiac surgeons in the country. If he says he has an emergency surgery, you should be rolling out the red carpet for him, not treating him like a criminal." Her words were a powerful declaration of support, a public defense of my professional integrity and the urgency of my situation. If you are still watching this video and find these stories useful, please comment number 2 below to let me know that you are still watching this video with me. Thank you for your valuable time. Robert, visibly flustered by Sarah's passionate intervention, stammered, "Mom, we were just following procedure." "Procedure?" Sarah's voice cut through his words with sharp disbelief. "Is it procedure to racially profile someone and prevent them from performing their essential duties?" Her retort was not just a critique of the specific incident, but a broader condemnation of systemic injustice. Her anger and frustration were palpable, and they struck a chord with the growing crowd, turning their sympathy into a collective outcry for justice. The security guards exchanged uneasy glances, their faces painted with a blend of confusion and anxiety. The tall, broad-shouldered guard with a grim expression muttered, "Maybe we should check with the airline staff again." His voice trembling slightly, as though he feared the situation might spiral further out of control. The tension in the air was almost tangible, a palpable mix of frustration and uncertainty that seemed to hover over everyone in the vicinity. Sarah, her patience worn thin, took decisive action. Without a moment's hesitation, she yanked out her phone and dialed with a sense of urgency. "I'm calling the head of the airline. This nonsense is going to stop right now," she declared, her voice slicing through the chaos like a beacon of resolve. Her determination was fierce, an unmistakable signal that she would not tolerate any further delays or mishandling. As she spoke into the phone, her face reflected a storm of emotions: anger, frustration, and a fierce protectiveness that she wore like armor. The entire scene seemed to stretch into an unending void of suspended time. The once bustling airport terminal, with its ceaseless hum of activity and noise, now felt eerily quiet, as if time itself had come to a halt. Every passerby, every airport employee seemed to freeze in place, their eyes locked on the unfolding drama with a mix of curiosity and discomfort. The usual rhythm of the terminal was disrupted, replaced by a heavy silence that accentuated the intensity of the moment. Finally, after what felt like an eternity of waiting and mounting frustration, Robert, the airline supervisor, spoke up, his voice carrying an air of deep contrition. "Dr. Johnson, I sincerely apologize for the inconvenience you've suffered. We will expedite your check-in immediately," he said, his tone filled with genuine regret. His words, though soothing, could not erase the lingering sting of the ordeal. Without waiting for a reply, he directed a subtle but decisive gesture toward the security guards, who, understanding the gravity of the situation, immediately stepped back, their expressions a mix of relief and embarrassment. Karen, the check-in attendant, looked visibly shaken as she scrambled to process my boarding pass. Her hands shook slightly as she worked, her face a mask of stress and apology. In mere moments, my boarding pass was ready, and Robert, with an air of sincere remorse, personally escorted me to the gate. "Please forgive the misunderstanding, Dr. Johnson. We will ensure this never happens again," he said earnestly, his eyes reflecting a deep remorse that matched his words. As I boarded the plane, a tumult of emotions overwhelmed me. The relief of finally moving past the distressing situation was overshadowed by simmering anger and profound exhaustion. I settled into my first-class seat, yet the bitterness of the experience clung to me like an unwelcome shadow. The luxurious surroundings did little to soothe the hurt and frustration that lingered from the ordeal. As the plane's engines roared to life and we began our ascent, I closed my eyes and drew in a deep, calming breath. The turbulence of my thoughts and emotions mirrored the physical ascent of the aircraft, each moment filled with a mix of relief and lingering resentment. It was clear that this day, marked by such intense and unsettling experiences, would be etched into my memory for years to come, a stark reminder of the tumultuous intersection of human error and personal frustration. Back in the terminal, the crowd's murmurs grew louder, their collective anxiety palpable. Robert and the security guards exchanged nervous glances, their discomfort mirrored by the tense atmosphere. Nurse Thompson, her face flushed with indignation, turned sharply toward the airport staff, her voice quivering with righteous anger. "Do you have any idea what you're doing? Dr. Johnson has saved countless lives. He delivered a groundbreaking lecture at our conference on innovative techniques in cardiac surgery," she said, her voice thick with emotion and disbelief. Robert's face turned a deep shade of crimson, his embarrassment evident. He stammered, "Dr. Johnson, there's been a terrible misunderstanding." His apologies, though heartfelt, were drowned out by the ticking clock. My gaze was fixed on it, watching the seconds slip away with mounting anxiety as boarding time approached. "I need to board now," I demanded, my voice firm and unwavering. The urgency in my tone cut through the panic that enveloped the space. The air was charged with palpable tension as Robert's face transitioned from red to a ghostly white, his sweat-streaked face a testament to the pressure he was under. He turned to Karen, the attendant, with an intense urgency, shouting, "Print Dr. Johnson's boarding pass now." His frantic commands were a final, desperate attempt to rectify the situation before it escalated further. Karen's urgency was palpable as she rushed back to the counter, her fingers moving with a frenetic energy across the keyboard. The scene around us was a chaotic blend of anxiety and confusion. The crowd, a sea of faces marked by disbelief and unease, continued to film the unfolding drama, their phones raised like modern-day witness stands. Some of them applauded, their claps echoing through the terminal, while others murmured in shocked disbelief, their voices a low, anxious hum. Nurse Thompson's grip on my arm was both a gesture of solidarity and a reminder of the gravity of the situation. Her eyes, full of regret and empathy, locked onto mine as she spoke with heartfelt sincerity. "Dr. Johnson, I can't even begin to express how sorry I am for this. It's beyond comprehension that such things still happen in our world." Her words, though meant to console me, only deepened my sense of urgency and frustration. I gave a brief nod, my mind solely fixated on the critical task ahead, reaching the plane before it was too late. "Thank you for your quick thinking, Nurse Thompson. You may have just saved a life today." Robert's return was marked by a frantic energy. He handed me my boarding pass with a look of determined urgency, his actions almost pushing me toward the security checkpoint. "This way, Dr. Johnson. We're going to get you to the gate right now," he said, his voice edged with anxiety and determination. We sprinted through the labyrinth of airport corridors, Robert's shouts slicing through the air as he implored people to clear the way. The security staff, having been briefed on the emergency, moved us through with a remarkable swiftness that felt like a small miracle amidst the chaos. We finally reached the gate, breathless, and with only moments to spare before the doors closed. The flight attendant stationed at the gate looked at us with a mix of sympathy and skepticism, her hand hovering over the door control, as if it were the barrier between us and a solution. "I'm sorry, but we're about to close boarding," she said, her voice tinged with regret but firm in its finality. Robert, panting heavily and frazzled by the urgency, intervened with a desperation that mirrored my own. "Please, you have to let Dr. Johnson board. There's been a terrible misunderstanding, and he needs to be on this flight." The flight attendant's gaze flitted between me and Robert, her confusion evident as she tried to grasp the gravity of the situation. I'm not sure if I can." At that precise moment, my phone rang, its tone cutting through the tension like a lifeline. It was Dr. Peterson from Chicago, his voice urgent and strained with concern. I answered immediately, putting the call on speaker as the situation grew increasingly dire. "Marcus, where are you?" "The patient is already being prepped for surgery," Dr. Peterson's voice crackled through the phone, a mixture of anxiety and expectation filling the air. "I'm at the gate now, James. There was a significant issue, but I'm working through it," I replied, locking eyes with the flight attendant, whose expression shifted as she processed the seriousness of my situation. With a nod of understanding and a gesture of compassion, she stepped aside and opened the gate door. "Go ahead, Dr. Johnson. I wish you the very best with the surgery." With my heart pounding like a drum in my chest, I sprinted down the jet bridge, each step feeling like a race against time. As I boarded the plane, the curious stares of the first-class passengers pierced through me, their looks a mix of bewilderment and concern as they undoubtedly wondered about the cause of the unexpected delay. I barely had time to settle into my seat before the plane began its taxiing, the roar of the engines a deafening reminder of the urgency of my mission. I closed my eyes, desperately trying to calm my racing heart and focus on the critical task that awaited me. If you are still watching this video and find these stories useful, please comment on number 3 below to let me know that you are still watching this video with me. Thank you for your valuable time. The 2-hour flight to Chicago stretched out like an eternity, each minute feeling like a lifetime as my mind replayed the chaotic events of the airport. Frustration, anxiety, and relief battled within me, creating a tumultuous storm of emotions. As soon as the plane touched down, I reached for my phone with a sense of urgency and weariness. "James, I've landed. I'm on my way." "Thank God, Marcus. Mr. Thompson is stable for now, but we need to get started on the surgery immediately." "What on earth happened?" Dr. Peterson's voice carried a mixture of relief and intense curiosity, reflecting the gravity of the situation. I sighed deeply, the weight of the day's events pressing heavily on me. "It's a long and complicated story, James. I'll explain everything once I arrive." A hospital car was waiting for me as I disembarked from the plane, a familiar and somewhat comforting sight amid the chaos of the day. As we made our way through the bustling streets to the hospital, my mind was consumed with troubling thoughts. The distressing incident at the airport had left me reeling. My appearance and the subsequent mistreatment I endured had nearly jeopardized a patient's life, and the weight of this injustice was heavy on my shoulders. It gnawed at me, threatening to derail my focus, but I knew I had to push those thoughts aside and concentrate on the critical surgery ahead. The journey to the hospital was swift, almost as if time itself was racing against us. Upon arrival, I was greeted by a team that was already in motion, their readiness a small beacon of hope in a day filled with challenges. The operating room was prepared, and every member of the medical team was poised for action, their anticipation palpable. Dr. Peterson, who had been my constant ally through countless procedures, briefed me on the patient's current state. His voice carried a mix of relief and urgency. "Marcus, I'm incredibly grateful you're here," he said, his tone reflecting the gravity of the situation. "Mr. Thompson experienced a minor complication just an hour ago, but we managed to stabilize him. We're set to begin the moment you give us the green light." I took a deep breath, deliberately pushing away the frustrations and anxieties that had plagued me throughout the day. My sole focus now was the life that lay in front of me and the task of saving it. "Let's get started," I responded, steeling myself as I stepped into the operating room. The ensuing hours were a blur of high-stakes precision and relentless intensity. Mr. Thompson's condition was more precarious than initially anticipated, with complications arising that threatened his survival. There were moments when the outcome seemed uncertain, and the team worked with a level of coordination and urgency that bordered on miraculous. After what felt like an interminable period, we finally completed the surgery. The sight of Mr. Thompson's heart beating steadily was a profound relief. As I emerged from the operating room, exhaustion weighed heavily on me, yet a sense of relief was also present. Dr. Peterson was waiting outside, his tired smile a testament to the day's trials. "You did it, Marcus. It was touch and go for a while, but you managed to save him," he said, his admiration clear. I nodded, feeling the emotional and physical toll of the day settle on me. "It was far too close, James." "Far too close," I replied, my voice heavy with the strain of the day's events. Dr. Peterson's expression shifted as he noted the depth of my exhaustion and the underlying tension. "What happened at the airport, Marcus? You seem unsettled, and I suspect it's more than just the surgery." I hesitated, unsure of how to convey the profound humiliation and anger I had experienced. The words felt inadequate to capture the full extent of the emotional turmoil. "James," I began, but my phone's notification interrupted me. It was a social media alert, and as I glanced at the screen, my heart sank. The notification revealed a video of the airport incident, already accumulating thousands of views and shares. The caption read, "Black doctor prevented from boarding emergency flight, airport racism exposed." My hand shook as I showed the video to James. His expression morphed into one of shock and outrage as he absorbed the footage. "My God, Marcus," he murmured, his voice thick with disbelief. "This is appalling. How did you manage to stay composed enough to perform the surgery after all that?" I let out a weary sigh. I had no choice, James. Mr. Thompson's life was on the line. Just then, a nurse appeared in the hallway, her face a mixture of concern and excitement. "Dr. Johnson, Dr. Peterson, you need to see this. It's all over the news." We followed the nurse down the corridor to the waiting room, where a small cluster of hospital staff had gathered in front of the television. The room was filled with an uneasy energy as everyone focused on the screen. A serious-faced news anchor appeared, delivering an unsettling report. "Shocking footage from this afternoon's incident at the international airport is currently making waves on social media," the anchor said gravely. The video depicts renowned cardiac surgeon Dr. Marcus Johnson being barred from boarding an emergency flight, an action that appears to be motivated by racial discrimination. My stomach tightened as the images of the airport unfolded on the screen. The footage was raw and unfiltered. The angry crowd, Robert desperately trying to explain the situation, and Nurse Thompson valiantly stepping in to defend me. It felt like a punch to the gut to see everything laid bare for the world to scrutinize. The anchor continued. Despite the significant delay caused by this incident, Dr. Johnson ultimately arrived in Chicago in time to save his patient's life. James placed a comforting hand on my shoulder. His expression was serious and concerned. "Marcus, this situation is escalating. You need to address it publicly." I shook my head, overwhelmed by fatigue. "Not right now, James. My priority has to be checking on Mr. Thompson's recovery." But before we could exit the room, my phone buzzed with another call. It was Dr. Laura Chen, the hospital director. Her voice, tinged with both worry and urgency, came through the line. "Marcus, I just saw the news. We need to discuss how to respond. The press is already demanding a statement." I closed my eyes momentarily, feeling the weight of the situation press down on me. "Laura, I've just come out of a 6-hour surgery. I'm not in the right state of mind to talk to the press right now." "I understand, Marcus," she said, her tone softening with empathy. "But we can't just ignore this. This is a chance to confront a serious issue head-on and push for real change." I took a deep breath, recognizing the truth in her words. "All right, Laura. Give me an hour to check on my patient and regain my composure. After that, I'll address the press." After ending the call, I made my way directly to the ICU to see Mr. Thompson. He was awake, his eyes fluttering open as I entered the room. "Dr. Johnson," he said weakly, his voice carrying a note of relief. I heard the nurses talking. "Is it true what happened at the airport?" I paused, choosing to be forthright. "Yes, Mr. Thompson. There was a significant misunderstanding, but the critical point is that we managed to get here in time." His hand, though trembling, reached out to grasp mine. "Thank you, doctor. Not just for saving my life, but for enduring all that trouble to make it here." I felt a rush of emotion, deeply touched by his gratitude. "It's my duty, Mr. Thompson. Focus on resting now. You have a long road to recovery ahead of you." If you are still watching this video and find these stories useful, please comment number 2 below to let me know that you are still watching this video with me. Thank you for your valuable time. I left the room with a profound sense of renewed determination, feeling as though a heavy shroud had been lifted from my shoulders. As I emerged into the hallway, the stark contrast of the bustling activity outside seemed almost surreal. James was waiting for me, his eyes filled with a blend of unwavering support and quiet resolve. His simple question ready carried a weight of encouragement and solidarity. I met his gaze with a firm nod, the silent agreement between us echoing with the weight of the moment. "Let's do this," he said, his voice steady, and together we moved towards the conference room, each step echoing our shared commitment to confronting the day's challenge. The scene that greeted me as I entered the conference room was overwhelming. The space was packed, not just with journalists, but with a sea of cameras and flashing lights that created a dizzying effect. The relentless pop of flashbulbs and the murmur of eager voices filled the air, a cacophony of anticipation and scrutiny. Dr. Chen stood beside me, her presence a beacon of silent, yet profound support amid the chaos. I took a deep breath, attempting to steady my racing heart and quell the exhaustion that seemed to seep into every pore. As I approached the microphone, a wave of silence washed over the room, the noise fading into a hushed reverence that seemed to amplify the gravity of the moment. "Good evening, everyone," I began, my voice trembling slightly as I fought to maintain composure despite the weariness that had settled deep within me. "My name is Dr. Marcus Johnson. Today I faced a situation that no professional, no human being should ever have to endure. The words felt heavy and charged with raw emotion as I continued. I was judged not by my skills or my character, but by the color of my skin. Each sentence seemed to echo the depth of my experience, and the room's absolute silence mirrored the weight of my revelation. The silence that followed was almost tangible, a collective breath held in anticipation. But this isn't just about what happened to me today. This is a reflection of a far-reaching, systemic issue that affects people of color every single day, infiltrating every aspect of their lives. We must address this issue with urgency and resolve. And we must strive for a change that is both profound and lasting. As I spoke, I felt a gradual lifting of the weight that had pressed down on me throughout the day. This moment was a critical first step in a long journey, a beacon of hope amidst the struggle. I want to extend my heartfelt gratitude to those who stood by me today, I continued, my voice gaining a touch of warmth as I mentioned individuals who had made a significant impact. In particular, I want to acknowledge Nurse Thompson, whose unwavering support and bravery provided a crucial lifeline during an exceptionally difficult time. And most importantly, I wish to express my deep appreciation for the medical team here in Chicago who worked tirelessly to save Mr. Thompson's life. His recovery is progressing well, and that, above all, is what truly matters to me. The words carried a deep sense of gratitude, underscoring the importance of those who had rallied around me in my time of need. I paused, allowing myself a moment to collect my thoughts and emotions. By sharing my story, I hope to illuminate the persistent and often unseen challenges faced by people of color. Even in the most critical situations, such as saving a life, we must recognize our collective responsibility to do better, and this endeavor requires a united effort from all of us. The gravity of my message resonated deeply, and as I concluded, the applause that erupted was a powerful acknowledgement of the need for change. As I stepped back from the microphone, Dr. Chen's gentle squeeze on my arm felt like a lifeline, a moment of human connection amidst the sea of faces and flashing cameras. "You did great, Marcus," she whispered, her voice filled with genuine admiration and solidarity. I nodded, overwhelmed by a complex mix of relief and exhaustion that washed over me like a tide. The press conference may have ended, but I knew that the journey ahead would involve more questions, more interviews, and perhaps more challenges. Yet, at this moment, I took solace in the knowledge that I had taken a significant step toward addressing an issue that needed to be confronted. With this thought firmly in mind, I made my way back to the ICU, acutely aware that the real work, the profoundly important work of healing, was only just beginning. As you've seen, the journey we go through in life can be filled with unexpected challenges and eye-opening moments. What do you think about this story? What have you learned so far? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Please take a moment to comment below on one thing you've learned and how you plan to bring it into practice in your life. If you like this video, please leave your comment below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Your support helps us continue sharing stories that inspire and provoke thought. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.